Hi, my name is Ann Werda. I'm the founder of Kids at the Core, providing resources and tools for educators to help all kids grow. Today we're going to be talking about Type 3 assessments and how we can use those to measure growth. So if we're designing our Type 3 assessments to measure and monitor learning over time, we've got our baseline assessment and of course our post-test, but these formatives that fall in between become incredibly important pieces to help students figure out what they need to do to be successful, and of course to help the teacher realize how they need to pivot instruction to meet the needs of all the students. Now, no matter what kind of assessment we're facing, formative, summative, common assessment, or individual teacher assessment, these three assessment elements remain the principles of quality design. Really understanding and being intentional about the content you're measuring, the format in which you're measuring it, and of course the level of complexity at which you ask the questions. So realize that these three cornerstones are going to be the most important pieces of assessment design, no matter what the purpose of the assessment might be. Let's talk a little bit about the content for a minute, because this is quite an undertaking for many teachers. As we try to figure out what we're going to be measuring, we look at the content that we teach in any instructional interval, and it's somewhat overwhelming. We're teaching quite a bit of content to our students, and really no assessment can possibly measure all the minutia of a single curriculum. So what we want to do is we want to pick out the most important things. How can we determine what is essential to measure and monitor? What are the highest priority things we're teaching? Now, the work of people like Doug Reeves and Larry Ainsworth, Grant Wiggins have talked about different ways to focus on the most important enduring essential skills and knowledge. The first piece is the idea of endurance. This is where we're looking at a particular skill having value beyond a single unit. So if you look at any of the questions that are on a unit test and they don't appear on any other assessment, chances are they don't have endurance. These are pieces that are important for the student over a longitudinal piece of time. Leverage is the second piece, and this is where we're looking at knowledge and skills that are of value in more than one discipline. So for example, making inferences is a skill that we use in a lot of subjects. We can make inferences in science, we can make inferences in English language arts, we can make inferences in social studies. So really this has a lot of leverage because it's got that cross-curricular component for the students. The last piece is the readiness for the next level of learning, and this is really what we're talking about in terms of our vertical alignment. So vertical alignment to the next class or course, even vertical alignment to life. Will this be of value beyond this course, and is it necessary for success at the next level? When we talk about what's essential, we really like to boil it down to the idea of big ideas. And Grant Wiggins is probably most famous for his work in this area. What are our big ideas here? Well, an idea is considered big if it helps us make sense of lots of confusing bits of experiences and seemingly isolated facts. In other words, those one-hit wonders that show up in one unit but not in the other units, those things that maybe don't have endurance. The big idea is what ties together and gives some sort of a conceptual flow between multiple units and helps us to see how they're interrelated. So typically a big idea is incorporating multiple content standards, and it's integrating multiple units of study. So whether you're looking at the work of Larry Ainsworth, Doug Reeves, Grant Wiggins, the common theme here is we're looking at ideas and skills that run longitudinally over multiple units of study and really have power. And as Grant Wiggins says, an idea with power is an idea that helps learners make sense of an otherwise isolated content, and which cannot help but bring inquiry. In other words, the student starts to ask the essential questions and wants to dig deeper, understanding underneath these big ideas. So let's imagine 4 theoretical units. And if each of these units, we have multiple assessments that focus on the content that's isolated and specific to each of those units, we have to step back for a minute and think about the big idea. What are the threads that may run through multiple different units? And if we're able to pull out these essential skills or big ideas, what we'll find is what's essential about circles very well might be related to or exactly what's important and essential about squares. So what we can do is in our Type 3 or Type 2 assessments, we're measuring and monitoring the essential learning throughout time by looking at these essential pieces and seeing how the students are growing in these essential learnings. Of course, 3 is not a magic formula, but you're going to need a minimum of 2 data points to talk about growth and learning over time. And those formatives, as we said before, those midpoints are just incredibly important for keeping the student aware of how they are doing in the learning process, and of course helping the teacher to pivot and change what they're doing to meet the needs of all students. Now, when we talk about measuring sustained growth, we need to differentiate between the idea of memorizing facts and skills with longitudinal value. So in these instances, we look at these facts and we say, well, once the fact is memorized, what additional learning is occurring over time? And really, the only thing left to do once you've memorized a fact, of course, is to forget that fact. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're asking the students to do things with that information, like apply it, use it in a process, evaluate it, use it in higher levels of DOK or higher levels of complexity. If you have any questions, please feel free to let us know or check out our website, kidsatthecore.com.